Right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Fuchs, and I am a senior specialist in the Community Education Department at MDA. We are thrilled to have you join us for today's webinar on equipment and assistive technology. This learning series is a part of our larger MDA community education program, which focuses on bringing the neuromuscular disease community together around education and resources. Be sure to visit the community education section on mda.org for updates and upcoming events. We are recording today's event and will be posting it to the website for on-demand viewing at a later date. Please know that all phone lines have been muted, but you can still ask questions. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of today's webinar with today's presenters. Simply use the chat feature to type in your questions, and feel free to type in your questions and send them in as you think of them, and they will be addressed at the end. For nearly 75 years, MDA has led the way in funding research to accelerate the development of new treatments, expanding access to care and clinical trials through the MDA Care Center Network, and advocating for access and inclusion for the neuromuscular disease community. MDA delivers its mission through research, advocacy, access to care, education, recreation, and engagement. Since its inception, MDA has invested more than $1.1 billion in neuromuscular disease research. MDA funds projects throughout the drug development spectrum, from early discovery through translational stages and infrastructure support for clinical trials. At MDA care centers located at over 150 top medical institutions nationwide, people living with neuromuscular disease and their families find more than medical expertise. They experience a community fiercely dedicated to advancing access to care and nurturing hope. MDA's advocacy work focuses on support for accelerated approvals and novel research, access to healthcare, treatments, independent living, newborn screening, accessible air travel, and more. This focus plays a vital role in shaping laws and policies that support the needs of people living with rare neuromuscular diseases. Our community education and recreation programs are designed to connect individuals and families. We are committed to building a nurturing environment where our members can share experiences, triumphs, and challenges. In 2023, we offered over 40 educational programs, over 20 summer camps, and dozens of other community activities, both in person and virtually. If you haven't done so already, we invite you to join the MDA community by registering with us, and registering is free. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speakers, Tom Simon and Katie Matheny. Tom and Katie will be presenting together on two topics: mobility equipment and navigating services. We will split our learning into two sections and have a Q&A session after each presentation. Katie Matheny is an occupational therapist with over 30 years of experience in neurological rehabilitation and has worked with ALS patients for more than 2 decades. She is part of the team of providers in the Texas Neurology ALS Clinic and delivers in-home private care to help people living with ALS improve their quality of life and manage the challenges of the disease. Tom has extensive experience and knowledge as an ATP and has been working in the field for 21 years. He has been a registrant of the International Registry of Rehabilitative Technology Suppliers for 18 years and has served as the VP of the INRRTS. He serves on the board of directors for the Muscular Dystrophy Association. One of his passions includes working with the ALS population and has worked with 2 multidisciplinary ALS clinics in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for 20 years. He has served thousands of clients with ALS during this time. Tom is also passionate about working with clients who have muscular dystrophy, serving as a camp counselor for 31 years. Tom currently lives in Texas and enjoys traveling the world with his wife, Stacy, always exploring. Thank you both for being here today, and I will now turn the time over to you.
So as Sarah said, Katie and I have been working together probably for 20 years now at Texas Neurology, one of the multidisciplinary ALS clinics here in Dallas. And we see clients together. We're good friends, and we're very excited to be here today, just sharing a little bit about what we love. And that's neuromuscular disease and making people's lives better through independent mobility and function. So with that, we'll get started. And bear with us about the technology because neither one of us are really superstars in that area. So here we go. So let's just talk a little bit about our objectives today. First thing, we're going to outline the different types of mobility devices that may be used for patients with a neuromuscular disease.
And what we want to do today is explain some of the barriers that you may face in trying to get access to that mobility equipment. Unfortunately, the road to getting the equipment you need can be a little bit complicated. And we hope to give you a basic understanding of the process, some of the language that's used in that process, and requirements that the therapist and insurance providers require us to submit, and then to talk about resources out there for you.
So mobility, the quality of being mobile.
We'll be talking about equipment that makes you mobile, things that are helpful to you to move from place to place on your own or with the help of others. Being mobile in general makes us able to access the things we want to do and see. So being able to get in places that you want to participate in activities is important. And so we've got tools out there that allow you to do this independently and to be active in the life that you choose to be.
Yeah, mobility is something that sometimes we don't even think about. You know, I know I'm going to get up and I'm just going to walk out of here and I'm going to get in my car and drive home and walk in my house. But there's sometimes people living with neuromuscular diseases don't necessarily have it like that. So it's our job, it's our responsibility to help educate on how we can make that happen. So you'll see this slide break, and we're first going to talk a little bit about equipment. So equipment. What is equipment used for? We have balance. We have equipment for gait. Gait means walking. Sometimes people refer to it as ambulation. We also have equipment for transfers and positioning. And a lot of times we don't necessarily think about that being mobility. However, it is mobility because it helps you get from point A to point B when maybe that's not something that you can do independently. And then lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about wheeled motion.
If we look at balance from this aspect, this observing the way you get around on your own is something a therapist does. PT, OT does in functional activities, looks at that as well. And when we recognize there's trouble with your balance, that you're unsteady, you're kind of furniture cruising in your home, that can be a term that we use a lot of times to just describe that fact that I'm just not comfortable feeling like I might lose my balance, or I just need something that gives me a steady pacing for walking. So if you look at this, we've got canes, walking poles, trekking poles, and these are things that we can find in all kinds of places. The important factor, I think, from a therapy standpoint is that you can get access to a lot of these things that help with that simple balance disturbance, but you also need some adjustments to that. So talking with a therapist to find out which one is more effective for you, or even possibly trying out different pieces of equipment, is really important.
Yeah, you might say, well, where do I get a cane or walking poles or trekking poles? Never heard of those things. Well, everybody's probably heard of a cane, and sometimes you'll hear referred to as a single tip cane. So that's just one point on the ground, but now it actually gives you 3 points of contact with the ground, your 2 feet and one cane. And what I like to talk about at clinic when I talk to people about canes is if you want to go see a lot of canes, go to Walgreens, go to CVS, or even go to the pharmacy at Walmart and Target, and they'll have a bunch of them out. Just grab one, use it, walk around with it, see which one you like, what color you like. and then just go ahead and purchase that. I mean, that's the best way to actually try a lot of canes. Walking poles and trekking poles, they've been used all over the world for a long time for people who actually hike. And why do they use them? To maintain balance when they're going over rocky roads and things like that. But they could actually help you if single walking pole or two. And if you go to places like REI or any of the camping stores or outdoor stores that you have in your area, you can actually literally try them once again and demo them and pick out the color that you want and pick out your price point. And then just go ahead and pick those up and go out there and be steady if you have difficulty with balance.
Then we get into talking about gait. You're walking, moving on foot, and there's lots of different types of gait. Some people have braces or things on their legs that help with strength or stability with their legs. But in this case, talking about a walker or a rollator, those are things that assist you when you're getting around on foot, but you might need more than what the cane can offer. And this is where we kind of get into a gradual progression into different types of equipment. The walker or rollator adds another layer of safety for when you're walking around that the cane can't meet. Canes also get a little bit left behind. You can't always leave them readily accessible. And so the walker or a rollator can be helpful for keeping it close by and being able to use that more easily. With these things, there's all kinds of versions, and with the advanced versions that have brakes or that have the type that you stand up, a U-step type one, or different capacities, those need a little bit more justification from a therapist and guidance from a therapist to be able to say these are going to meet your needs in a better way that keeps you safe and actively involved in your everyday activities.
Yeah, so here's that word gait again. That just means walking or ambulation, just the ability to walk, gait. So there's very simple walkers. There's some that are aluminum and they just fold up and they don't have any wheels, or you can add wheels to the front. You can have, I know everybody's seen the tennis balls on the back of a four-post walker, and that's just to help it slide across the surface if you can't necessarily pick it up. And then there's rollators. Rollator is a term for something that has, it's a four-wheeled walker that has brakes and has a seat. So a place that you might be able to rest if you get tired, or maybe your endurance isn't quite what it used to be and you just need a place to stop. And please do not push anyone while they're sitting on a walker. We see it all the time. However, that's not really what the engineer's intention was when they designed that, but we understand real life sometimes. So, but the walker and rollator, these are actually coded by insurance and they do have a fee schedule. So, but it's going to take a while to get one in the industry. So probably your best option is go to Amazon and search walker and a rollator and pick your favorite color, and you can probably get it the same day or the next day. And they range anywhere from $100 to $150.
Our next area is talking about transfers and positioning, and these are just a few of the items that we could kind of consolidate to talk about in relation to your ADLs, your activities of daily living. These things are helpful for your daily routine, for your bathing, your dressing, your moving about your house, your access to different parts of your living environment. The gait belt gives someone a safe hold to help you as you move along. And this might be along the lines of the cane. There's an unsteadiness in your walking and just that fear that there might be a trip or a fall on the horizon with you. So it gives someone a way to hold on to that and to keep you secure and safe, or to help you get up from like a seated position. You've got like the draw sheet. A draw sheet, again, is something that someone can use to help you move around in bed. That's mobility, is moving in your bed, being able to move around. The emergency transfer sling we mentioned there is one for safety specifically that gives firefighters or someone that's doing an emergency evacuation a way to get you out of your space safely downstairs and move you around. It's more like a chair position and then has handholds on the sides. Sliding boards or Beasy boards are those that help you move from one place to another. You can use these on your own, or you can use them with the help of someone to move you around.
Yeah, that's great, Katie. I like the emergency transfer sling because that can even be used by family members that might not be able to lift you, but if you got two of them there, they can do that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about lift chairs. So lift chairs, maybe some of you haven't heard of that before, but they are actually like recliners that actually push you forward and allow you to stand up at about a 45-degree angle, and then you can have a walker in front of you, or you can actually take a few steps. So Medicare insurance, I'll talk about insurance. Insurance does not pay for a lift chair. They actually just pay for the motor part of it, the actual lifting device. And right now with Medicare will pay 80% of like $284. So it comes out to, $170. And then let's say the lift chair costs $1,000, then you would be responsible for the rest of it. Once again, you have to be able to ambulate, you have to be able to walk to qualify for a lift chair. If you're any type of mobility device, wheelchair, scooter, power chair, you're not going to qualify for that. Fitted to you properly. Not that you have to have a fitting or an evaluation for it, but most of the time when you look them up, they'll say this is for someone who is 5'2" to 5'7", or if you were 6'4", you would not want to buy one that was from someone who is 5'2". It just wouldn't fit right. So let's talk about patient lift, or sometimes they're referred to as Hoyer lift. So the Hoyer was invented by a gentleman named Ted Hoyer back in the 1950s. And I know a lot of you are saying, oh, he's making that up, but that's a real story. You look it up online. So he used them in a nursing home. People were falling, getting hurt. The staff was getting hurt by trying to pick people up. So he created the first Hoyer lift. They've changed quite a bit over the years. And they actually can lift someone up to 400 pounds with one single person actually doing the lifting. Now, it's a little bit of a struggle, but it can be done. I, self-proclaimed Hoyer expert, have done thousands of Hoyer lifts on adults and young adults. As far as I sell them all the time to my ALS population and neuromuscular population. So the Hoyer lift, though, insurance does not cover an electric Hoyer lift. They only cover a manual Hoyer lift. That doesn't mean that you can't use a manual lift, because you can. An electric Hoyer lift is a little bit smoother in its operation, going up and down, and it doesn't have any stress to the caregiver who's actually using it. Just the other day, I saw one on Amazon for $699 for an electric Hoyer lift, and it was actually one that I would provide. So I totally support that, and that's an amazing price for an electric Hoyer lift. But it's all about really the proper sling. You should have, Katie and I love to use the divided leg sling. It's very easy to put on. We do not have to put it under the person. We don't really have to move the person to put it on. So those are the patient lifts. Probably, in my humble opinion, one of the best pieces of equipment ever invented to transfer people safely from point A to point B, and also to protect the caregiver, because we always have to take care of two people, the client and the caregiver. If you haven't noticed already, I like to talk. So Katie's over here.
We do have to watch our time.
Yeah. So let's talk. The last block is shower and commode, chair, bench, tilt, recline process. So the shower is probably the most dangerous room in the house when it comes to mobility, especially people who, even if you just have a simple balance issue, getting in the shower, everything is wet, everything is slippery, and everything inside there is hard. You do not want to fall. So they have shower benches. They have very simple ones without a back. They have some with a back. You can just buy those at, online or at Walmart, Target. They're very accessible. They have tub transfer benches that go on the outside, and the other side goes on the inside, and you can cross over. Somebody has to lift your legs. And then they also have tub transfer benches that have a sliding seat on them. So you can actually sit on the outside, and you can actually slide on the inside. And then also for someone who doesn't have the ability to walk, or they have poor trunk control, we have tilt and recline in position rolling shower chairs that can go into a rolling shower. So those are all the different type of shower chairs. Katie, anything on that?
No, I was noticing, I think a question came up or a comment asking if we had any pictures on each of these things we're describing. I think we struggled with the idea of sharing so many pictures. There are lots of different versions out there, and hopefully the terminology or the language helps you look those up and find some different options. We all have kind of personal preferences on what looks and feels right, and then also intervention or input from a therapist can help you understand which ones would be more helpful. So didn't want to confuse it more by adding tons of pictures and feeling like that was the only option was out there. So
That's such a great point, and this is what I'd like to teach my clients is that if you go to Google and you just let's just say you put in shower bench, and if you go up to the top and you click images, then it'll show you about 2.7 million images of shower chairs, right? And so just take an afternoon and just look at these different pictures online, because we could have literally had 400 slides with just pictures on them, and so we did go back and forth about that. And then all of a sudden, you brought up a good point about preferences. And Katie and I have an ongoing discussion always about rolling shower chairs and what's appropriate and what's not. And that just comes from a relationship of working together for a long time. And the thing about the shower is that everybody's um, process is different. And that's why it really does take, it's really important to get some type of therapist involved that has experience, or an ATP involved that has experience with neuromuscular, to just talk about that and maybe even come out to your home and visit and give you advice on that.
yeah,
Okay.
a lot of it's about brainstorming what fits and suits and trial and error of all these things for sure.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So we're probably going to get into my favorite slide now. It's about wheeled motion. We went back and forth about what to title this slide,
I know.
and yeah, and so it's like, but wheeled motion it is. So you're going to kick it off?
Yeah, I'll give kind of brief descriptions of these again to kind of give you an understanding of their therapeutic kind of rationale for it. So if you're looking at a transport wheelchair, we're talking about, or they'll call it a rollabout chair. It really is for short trips, like going from home to the doctor's visit. It's pushed by someone else. It's easier to maneuver because it's got smaller wheels on it. So turning and moving around in environments that you aren't really sure what they'll be like is helpful. It's also lighter weight. It's about 17 pounds. So having someone loaded in the car is a little bit easier. And this is something important to consider. The frustration or limitations of it is that there's no real supportive seating system. And so there's nothing that's going to give you you can put a cushion in this. It's going to slide around and be frustrating at times. But all in all, this is a temporary seat situation to get you place to place so you can sit in another chair.
Yeah, so this is a great explanation, Katie. Transport chair, rollabout chair. It is covered by insurance. I think the billable code is E1034. It reimburses that about $75 or something like that. If you in my practice, don't really use a lot of transport chairs that we provide. It's not complex rehab. You can go on Amazon and find one for about $100, and it gets to you the next day. And sometimes that's the quickest way to actually take care of that. So.
Yeah, then another version is of wheeled mobility or motion is the manual wheelchair. So this has larger wheels in the back. It's intended for someone to push this on their own. So the wheels are higher, so you can have hand rims and things like that on it to make that easier. It also has push handles, so someone can help you or assist you with movement. These weigh a little bit more. They're about 50 pounds or so. And again, the seating is limited. These have some customizable aspects to them where you can get a comfortable seat cushion or back, and those can be added onto that, remembering that that also adds weight and kind of components that have to be taken apart to get it in and out of a car, van, or whatever sort of transportation.
Yeah, the manual wheelchair, it needs a face-to-face with a physician. It also needs an evaluation by a therapist who specializes in mobility. It actually is a 13th-month rental, and that through the insurance company. So it has a monthly rental. I think it rents for probably, I'm not really sure of the exact number, but the manual wheelchair is heavier. you say the weight? I think you did, right?
Around 50 pounds.
Yeah, around 50 pounds, give or take.
Yeah.
But the manual wheelchair is covered by insurance. It for the neuromuscular world, it's probably not something that we use a great deal because they might have some different types of needs, and we'll talk about the custom manual next.
So custom manual, well, I think I kind of went into that a little bit. Maybe we move on since we are chatting it up.
Yeah.
But custom manual goes into that idea of like adding a back or seat or some different things that make it more suitable for your comfort.
Yeah, I got that now.
Yeah.
So the custom manual is considered complex rehab technology in our world. It's what's called a K5, and so it's going to have an adjustable axle plate to allow the perfect setup for propulsion to actually get the greatest movement with a push of the hand rims. It's actually a chair that can actually be made to fit you based on width and depth. Lower leg length can be adjusted, the height of the back. Can even have a headrest on it if we need that for some reason for a younger person going to school. But the custom manual chair is expensive. That is covered by insurance. They usually range anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000 custom manual wheelchair. So now I guess we'll go into the first foray into powered mobility. Katie?
Yeah, so we get into power mobility, and this is talking about kind of your scooter, which has what they call the tiller that you drive from the front, so you're having to reach out for that, or some folding power wheelchairs that have little joysticks. Again, not your most supportive seating system, not really supportive at all. It's just a very basic seat, and that, we get into the idea of the determination codes that are required for Medicare and insurance approval of these things. And basically what they're talking about here is that you have mobility limitations, significantly impairs your way to do your MRADLs, which are your mobility related ADLs, your everyday activities that require some sort of help to move around. Your risk of injury, and knowing that doing something without this type of equipment, without a scooter or folding power chair, would make it almost impossible for you to do it. Or, it takes so much extra time for you to get from your bed to your bathroom or from your bathroom to your kitchen, that kind of thing, that then it becomes justified in ways that we look at that. You do have to have trunk control because you have to sit without support to drive these things. You need to be able to operate either the handle that's in front of you, kind of like a handlebar in a way, or the joystick. And you need to be able to get on and off of it independently, or some of the code issues that this becomes a possibility or one that's not quite suited to you.
Yeah, so folding power wheelchairs are not covered by insurance. If you Google that, there'll be about 10 million responses to folding power wheelchair. I love them because they bridge the gap between someone who might need a more complex piece of equipment, but someone who needs some type of power mobility for distance. Power scooters are covered by insurance. There's very few people that actually provide power scooters anymore. Unfortunately, the reimbursement has gone down so much, it's really close to cost. So, but they are out there. There's DME companies that actually provide power scooters now. Katie?
So we go into our custom power wheelchairs, and that becomes kind of these Lamborghini level chairs that can do a lot of things. You now are looking at maybe having more trunk instability, so you need more support in your seating system, or your arms are not functioning as well, so you need alternate drive controls. And that's where we get into justifying those needs and kind of stepping up the type of equipment that you need. And this, is just extras. You have tilt and recline, and you have alternate drive controls, and you have other types of seating support that can be added to this.
Yeah, custom power chair, that is in my wheelhouse. So that's what I've done for the last 21 years. Custom power, primarily with the ALS community, and also the adolescent community, Duchenne's, SMA, and many others. The custom power chairs just give people independence, not only in their movement, but also in their ability to act with their environment with with their computer, with their TVs, with anything that's in their house that they want to try to access. And you don't necessarily, Katie talked about alternative drive. You don't necessarily have to drive with your hand. With a progressive neuromuscular disease, you might need to, maybe you start with your hand, but then you get reevaluated for some other type of drive control. And there are very, very many. As an ATP assisted technology professional, my role is to just keep people independent and just living their life as normal as possible.
Kind of like an OT. He acts like an OT
I do.
sometimes.
I do identify more with
Which is
OTs.
so fine.
Yes.
Okay, and so we wouldn't be right in not including an accessible van in that wheeled motion, because when you get to a point of having a power wheelchair, custom power wheelchair, they're heavy. They require a little bit different types of help to get them outside of your house. You need a ramp and all of that to get out of your home. And then you also need a van that can take you places to use your power wheelchair in other places. And so that improves life satisfaction. And that's what we're about, is we want you to not be stuck at home with a great seat and wheels to move around and then not be able to get it out anywhere.
Yeah, I'm just going to say the van is the last piece of the mobility puzzle. We can provide a chair for you at home, and you can use it around your home and around your neighborhood. But in order to be able to go, you've got to have some way to transport that. The accessible vans, there's a lot of pre-owned equipment out there. You don't really have to buy new. There's a lot of financing. It is not my expertise field. However, I know people who worked in it a very long time. And that is what you want to try to look for. You want to try to get a referral to someone who's done it for a very long time. The accessible van and going, the only thing that really limits you anymore is what man has built or hasn't built. So get an accessible van if possible. There's a lot of questions popping up about funding and stuff, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But yeah, get an accessible van. So we'll talk a little bit about barriers.
Yeah, and as we've kind of mentioned different types of equipment, we get into some of the barriers for getting that equipment, and they may sound a little odd, and hopefully we get into or have a better explanation for you. But here we have financial and funding issues are obvious ones. Therapeutic intervention is maybe not one that you think about as much. Your environment and physical changes.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about funding. I just want to preface this. I do not sell insurance. I have insurance through my work, but as an ATP, it's important that I understand insurance and that I'm able to communicate to my clients for any financial exposure they might have. So some of the barriers are deductibles, copays, out-of-pocket maximum. So some of those words might sound foreign to you, but everybody normally has some type of deductible, some type of copay, and they usually have some type of out-of-pocket max. And out-of-pocket maximum means that if you pay this much, let's just use the easy math, $1,000, then now your insurance is going to pay at 100%, right? We've seen out-of-pocket maxes up to $10,000, $12,000, $13,000 based on the plan that you have. So to be able to understand all of these, most insurance plans have a website you can go to, and it has all of your details there, and you can look that up. Another barrier is delivery. So we can actually not deliver a piece of equipment until we get authorization from the insurance company and that all of the financial obligations have been met. So a lot of people say, well, how long does it take? Industry standard is 4 to 6 months. And we turn it around faster than that. But you can never promise anything because we never know what the insurance is going to do. So delivery can be a barrier sometimes.
Yeah, and knowing that once you get a prescription, there are a lot of steps in getting a prescription for this type of equipment. It doesn't necessarily guarantee you will acquire it. This comes into that whole realm where I think I have my dream bubble of, oh, all these things are great and I want them for you, and I have all kinds of ideas, but really the justification is where I have to land on the language that I use and the way that I identify the need for you then leads to the coverage of that equipment. But we're beholden to the providers, the insurance providers to allow that usually.
And that's when Katie normally calls me and says, hey, I'd like to get this for this client. And I have to give her the stark reality that, well, that's really not covered. So.
Yeah. You have to be honest with
So Katie's going to talk a little bit about therapeutic intervention.
How is that a barrier? That doesn't sound like a problem. But the reality is that access to the evaluation by a PT or OT, when we're specifically talking about some of the power mobility or different types of wheelchairs and things like that, it's really, one thing I want you to understand is that not waiting till you have a dire need to then get in touch with a therapist is really important. The ongoing intervention that you can receive from a therapist would be can lead to better choices along the road, but then also having things available prior to a dire need, I guess is what I'm saying. So if you are walking and you do walk somewhat functionally, but you do have issues or you fatigue, I'm especially talking about our ALS population, is that it's really hard to grasp the idea that we need this a lot earlier so that we have time to go through the ordering process and the funding process and all of that to get you the equipment that you need in a timely manner, not to have you waiting or stranded in a sense. And that's where that collaboration key comes, where the ATP, Tom, and I as a therapist we're able to have the conversation of what could we do here, what things would benefit in the meantime, and then what are we looking at as far as need in the future.
Yeah, it's really a team approach between the ATP and the therapist, and usually at a multidisciplinary clinic, it's a team approach amongst all of the different disciplines.
Yeah. Okay, another barrier that we talk about is your environment. So when you look at a new living situation, sometimes folks are in maybe a manual wheelchair or in some type of mobility device at that time that doesn't actually fit or suit to a new living situation. So we have to think about ways that has to be incorporated, or modifications or adjustments or things, how we can make that work. In the process of renovations, if you are renovating a bathroom or access to your home or things like that, you still need to live in your home. And a lot of times we don't think about, it's the ideal situation. We'll be ready one day, but what do we do in the time frame before that? And so looking at what's needed to prepare you for that future renovation, and then ramp access, just to get in and out of your home. You've got to have that for this wheeled mobility that we talk about. It's not just an easy fix. Tom's had some fun deliveries where, the pieces of the puzzle have to come together, right?
Yeah, I was just going to mention about just delivered one just the other day, and they did not have a ramp to get in, and we had talked about that, but it takes time. That's real life, So we just they had a porch, so I just backed my van up, put my ramp down in my van, and we just rolled the chair right off into the house. And then that weekend they were going to build a ramp because they need to be able to get out, And so environment can be a barrier. One of the things that is important to realize, though, that everybody thinks that they have to remodel their whole house just because they're getting a wheelchair, and that is not the case. If you go measure your doors in your home, most of them are 28-inch openings. Sometimes the bathroom is 22, and the front door is always 30 or 32. So a complex power wheelchair is 25 inches wide, 90% of the time. So that is going to be something that will move around in your house. And from an ATP or an OT perspective, we actually can do accessibility evaluations in the home. And that's part of what I do. So so don't go tearing the bathroom down until you talk to one of us.
Yeah, exactly. Then physical changes can be a barrier, requiring modifications to existing equipment that you have. Sometimes that's the first step. That's how can we make what you have work for you if it's still reasonably in good shape and meeting the needs that you have. New drive controls or seat components, or alternate options if you're talking about some of the wheeled mobility for ADLs, like a shower chair and things like that. We can look at ways to modify that. Physical changes, incorporating the use of new equipment. So we all have habits, and in this phase of having new equipment in your home or in your possession, there's a learning as well as an unlearning curve. And I think we underestimate how much our habits affect the way we do things. And so simple changes from, say, a manual wheelchair to a power wheelchair can make accessing a commode chair harder if you're doing that on your own, the height of your bed, the different things. So those things all have to be, considered in the process. And then we have to understand that we're each individual human beings who have different ways of doing things and different acceptance levels of equipment. I do see a lot of folks not adopting the use of, say, a power wheelchair, and their expression is more like, I'm waiting till I need it. I don't need it yet. And that's where I get into a little discussions with them over the fact that, like, waiting till you need it is a hard time to learn to use it. And so if we can progressively move into that, it's good. We talk a lot about abandonment of equipment, where we've gotten the equipment, we know the need, and then we get it. And usually this is based on either waiting too long to start to get familiar with it. It can also be related to family members wanting you to have, the equipment that they realize is really helpful for you, but you haven't accepted that you need it, or you're not really on board with using it. And so we have to go through those thought processes to help people along the way with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So now we're just going to talk a little bit about navigating the process. This is all the different things we're going to talk about here.
Seems like a lot of boxes.
The boxes.
It is. So
Identify the need.
Good. So here we're looking at client-driven goals and concerns. Here's where we're looking at, on the basic level, the need for the equipment is established. Is there a safety issue? Is there a fatigue issue? People are making choices that they don't do things that they enjoy and love because it's too hard to get to them, or it's too hard to move around in their environment to do those things on their own. Some of the concerns that come up are, the cost out of pocket, what is that going to cost me? And then functional use of it. Do I really need it, or could I get away with something else? The other, component where you talked about before is adding more equipment needs to just a single purchase. So buying a power wheelchair or ordering a power wheelchair and having that leads to needing the ramps or the van or the, different things that make that accessible. So those are things that have to be considered in the need. Therapist recommendations, they're concerned with your long-term as well as your short-term function and limitations. And so we look at the big picture and there's steps towards that. And sometimes, when I'm referring to folks in our ALS clinic, is like, there are a lot of things you could buy in the process, but this one item would be better for you for the longer term. And that's a little hard to accept at times, but that's recognizing the needs of those pieces of equipment.
Yeah, I think it's our job to take a snapshot of where people are at today, but also to understand where they may be in the future and to provide them with the information for them to make informed decisions.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about the clinic visit. So we have a physician face-to-face.
Yeah.
So that's where you're sitting down with the doctor, maybe a neurologist, maybe a PM&R doc, maybe your PCP. And they write in the clinical notes that this patient needs a power mobility device, or this patient needs a manual wheelchair. And then that is the first key to every type of mobility device, especially on any type of wheeled mobility.
And then the PT/OT evaluation comes into looking at your physical function at the level that you are and what you can do, and then what you're limited by. That can include muscle testing, watching you do different activities on your own or with assistance, observing your home environment or discussing that home environment with you, so that they get a good picture of your actual status and function. And then the prescription is really kind of that jumping point where things get started in the process.
Yeah, so ATP mobility and home assessment. So this is where actually, once the clinical notes have been done, the face-to-face, and then the therapist has done their evaluation, then the ATP is involved and they schedule a home visit where they would come out to your home and they would demo the product. They would also actually take a look at your home, and they would take measurements of you, Measurements are very important. Each custom piece of equipment is custom made for each individual. One of you people say, well, why do you take measurements? I'm 6 foot tall and I weigh 200 pounds. Well, you could have 3 6 foot tall people, and some people are tall in the legs and some people are tall in their trunk. And so you have to get the right measurement. So when they design the chair later, they're actually designing a chair to actually fit that person. The power chair should be the most comfortable place that you sit, because it also should provide you with function. So also, and then obviously we talked a little bit about home assessment, but home assessment for accessibility. So how am I going to move around? What are some tips and tricks that I can be told to help me accomplish that? There has not been a home that I've actually delivered a chair to, over the years, that we have not been able to use the chair in the home. Now, I'm not going to say there weren't some tight places, and I'm not going to say there weren't some scrape walls or floorboards, but the patient learned how to use the chair. So,
That's a good point.
funding. So I think I'm going to take this slide.
Yeah.
Yeah. So funding primary, secondary insurance. Most people have a primary. If you have Medicare, you might have a secondary or supplement. If you have private insurance, like you're working and maybe you have Blue Cross, Aetna, then that might be a process too. Most insurances, let's just talk about Medicare, they pay 80%. If you don't have a secondary or supplement, then you're responsible for the 20%. And if you work and you have an 80-20 plan and you have deductibles and copays and out of pockets, then when those are justified, then the insurance would pay at 100%. Items covered, allowables, and coded items.
It's tricky.
So a lot of items that we want, cup holders, phone holders, a tray, a simple tray, those are not necessarily covered by insurance because they're not coded or they're miscellaneous coded. And so there's no fee schedule for that. And so that would be an out-of-pocket expense. And you can write every letter that you want. You can have a therapist write every letter of medical necessity, but it's still not going to be funded because there's no fee schedule and there's no coded for that. But we try to work with every patient that we see to try to provide the best chair and give them options to actually get great miscellaneous items to be able to let them function in their environment. Out-of-pocket expenses. So we talked a little bit about that on some different things. Out-of-pocket expenses is what things aren't covered, and then all of a sudden, if you want that item, then you will pay out of pocket for it. However, there's a lot of things on Amazon. If you just Google wheelchair accessories, you don't even have to put power wheelchair, just wheelchair accessories, and you'll have many pages to look at. Most of those items are very reasonable, and you can actually get that to put on your chair and function without paying a lot. Grants. So grants are actually funding sources outside the norm. So you might have heard of Steve Gleason and the Gleason Foundation. And in your local area, there's probably a lot of different disease diagnosis specific organizations that provide funding. And so you as a family have to advocate for yourself and actually search to find out where those possible grants may come from. You can also rely on your clinical staff if they've heard of any. And that's very important to use all areas to get things funded.
Keep going. You're doing good.
So thank you, Katie. So procurement. So let's say we get approval. Mr. and Ms. Smith, we got approval for your chair. Would you still like to order it? Yes. So then we order the chair based on the quote. And then once we get the chair, there's a little bit of build time, and then we set up delivery. So that process, I went through very fast. And most of the time, once the chair is approved and we satisfied all the financial exposure obligation, then the chair actually does come to us within 5 to 7 days. And so that is remarkably fast.
That's after all the other steps.
Yeah, all the other.
Too excited. Yeah. I tend to jump on the idea that I heard that 3 to 5 days or whatever days you said, but that gets
yeah. There's many steps before that. So yeah, remember I said we get approval. So. And then probably one of the most important things to me is what's called follow along, right? We all have those stories in our lives. It doesn't even have to do with equipment, but it's just about people following along and doing what they said. So communication with ATP and the company, whoever your supplier is for any piece of equipment, especially if it was funded by insurance, you should have that ATP's name or a way to get in touch with his people and at the company, or you should have a way to access the company. And it shouldn't take an act of Congress for them to actually reach back out to you. That it's very important in my practice that I stay in touch with my clients and they stay in touch with me. Adjustments. So adjustments have to be made. You know, a lot of neuromuscular diseases, like we talked about, are progressive. And so what was working one day may not work the next day, or maybe we just need a little tweak and adjustment to make it work for you. And then, are you going to talk about education?
Yeah, I think that aspect from an OT perspective is really about practice. It's about learning to use your device, some training that Tom provides, and some of that technical aspect of how to make your chair work. Some of the things that I've learned along the way, or the fact that I'll call him and go, now, how do I do this? But I can help in training that learning curve for how to use the equipment. And then also from a therapy aspect, reminding you that the way a chair comes and even the way it's set up well for you when it arrives, there is still room for adjustments and for modifications and being able to fit that even more specifically to you. I think that's one of the keys, and I mentioned before, of equipment abandonment, is a lot of times from my perspective, I see people just kind of resigned to the fact that it came out of the package the way it did, the way it was delivered, and it just doesn't fit or feel right. And we have so much room to make adjustments, to make it suit you or meet you where you are. And that's something I think from that aspect, educating on knowing, hey, these things can be done. It can be adjusted and modified.
Yeah, well said.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Oh, and our last, well, not our last slide, but a slide that's very near and dear to us is practice, practice, practice. Yeah. Whether it's a cane or the most complex piece of equipment that you have, if you're not practicing with it, it really hurts my heart. So
I was telling Tom about the 20-hour rule. I think it applies to business practice, but I think it's really a life rule, is that it suggests that it takes 20 hours of deliberate and focused practice to learn a new skill. I can't always say that I do that. When I want to be able to do something, I jump into it and let's go, and it should figure itself out. But the reality is these things take deliberate, focused practice, and driving a power chair, adjusting yourself in a power chair, using another piece of equipment, all of those things take that practice time and that attention. And so knowing that 20 hours seems like a lot when you're first taking on something, but when you look at it from a 24-hour perspective, that's attainable. That's something day by day you can grow in use and function with it.
Most definitely, practice is key.
Yeah.
Very, very, very much key. Okay, now we open it up for questions. That was our presentation, and we are so happy that you guys are here. And if you notice, our contact information is on the bottom. I also added my cell phone number, and that if you just text me, I will answer any question you have. You know, Tom can manage his boundaries, so if you text me at 10 o'clock at night, I'll probably catch you at 8 o'clock the next morning. But I really, so many questions coming over, and we had questions prior to it that we answered. We'll get that information out to you also. But all right, thank you.
Thank you both so much for that informative presentation. So since we just went over the equipment, we are going to answer some questions that were entered into the chat during the presentation, but we are also going to answer some questions that were submitted upon registration. We may not be able to get through all of the questions because fortunately there was a lot of participation and registration, but Tom and Katie did answer some questions prior to the webinar. So hopefully we can get those together and send them to you via email when we send the recording of the presentation. So I will get right into some questions here. What is the difference between a walking pole and a trekking pole?
There's really not much of a difference. It's just kind of a referral to a reference to it. Some of them have different ends on the bottom of them so that they manage different terrain. And so they can just be found in that difference is really about it. Hand grip, that kind of thing can be different. Not very specific, sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you so much. Um, Next question is, what about power assist rollators, or convert from walker to scooter for going uphill? Example, I have seen a Kickstarter for one, but it doesn't seem common yet.
Not
Yeah, you're gonna see a lot of different stuff online. People are always trying to engineer the next new idea. A lot of them are fantastic, and a lot of them are new. And it's just gonna take time. Right now, there's nothing really like that that I know of on the market. Now, I don't know everything, that's for darn sure, but you just have to reach out to that Kickstart program and see where they're at with it. So.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you. Um, so someone else said my PT said she didn't think New Motion has power scooters. What companies do have power scooters?
Yeah, since that's a great question. New Motion does complex rehab technology, and scooters aren't necessarily in that mode. So I think the best thing to do would be actually to reach out to your insurance company. There's usually a number on the back of your insurance card, and in your local area, you can ask them who the providers are that provide power scooters, and they'll be able to give you a list of 3 to 5 people that you can contact. And then I would just do my due diligence in that respect. I will also say that you could probably buy a scooter online for about 1,000, or there is about $2 billion worth of equipment, abandoned equipment in people's garages and attics. And you could find probably one at a garage sale for a good $50. So.
Great, thanks, Tom.
Mm.
Should carpet be replaced with hardwood floor for ease of wheelchair or Hoyer access?
That's a tricky question. I mean, yes, ideally having the hardwood floors would be great. Are there options that you can use to get around that? Yes. Some simple things that we've done is using some of that. Why do I always forget
Desk
it?
chair
The-
laminate.
Yeah, the
Desk chair
laminate
plastic.
that actually secures to carpet. The harder versions of that, there are some soft versions that I think people use just to keep traffic off their carpet and just to walk on. But the harder ones create a hard surface for the wheels to move on. Those softer ones are just the wheels are gonna tear that up.
Katie and I had a patient that went and bought some 3/8 plywood, and they put
Yep.
a couple sheets in the bedroom where they were going to move the Hoyer. If you think about the Hoyer move, it really goes from bed either to toilet chair or it goes to power chair.
Yeah.
It doesn't really go, you're not really dragging it along the whole house. So if you can just manage just a smaller area where it's going to move, it's going to work perfectly for you. So.
Yeah. And the power chair is designed to move on different.
Yeah, the power
sides,
chair has
so
no
it's not
problem moving on
usually
carpet.
that.
It doesn't
Yeah.
care.
But yes, we would love for you to have hardwood floor if you could, or hard surface. Makes everything easier.
Thank you. Let's see here. We have, what types of sit to stand or crane lifts exist? How might one go about trying and or acquiring larger assistive devices?
Yeah, this question came up in the I think the registration question there. So I was a little bit sketchy on the name that he was trying to think, but
Yeah.
I think it means like overhead lifts that you might attach to the ceiling. So there's a whole network of people out there that actually do that, and if you just Google that in your local area, you'll find that those are not covered by insurance. Sometimes the VA will do it, sometimes Medicaid for kids, but typically private insurance and Medicare do not cover anything like that. So that's a great question. How do you sample equipment, right? And so you've just got to work with a company that provides that equipment and ask them either to provide a video or some type of come into the shop and take a look at what we have. But that's getting less and less as time goes on. So
It does seem like that was true.
Thank you. What can you tell us about small space elevators and other stair climbing technology?
Uh,
well,
Go ahead.
so I've seen a couple of elevators in people's homes because they put them in because they wanted the bedrooms are upstairs, and you can actually, elevators are expensive, and they're what's the word I'm looking for? They have rules about them, a lot of building codes, and elevators they have to follow a lot of codes. But they're out there, and people put them in their house as long as you have space and they get you from the bottom floor to the top floor. There's really no such thing as a small space elevator, because the elevator typically would lift a power wheelchair and maybe one person. So usually has to handle about 800 pounds. So
If we're talking about even maybe stair lifts, I'm not quite
Stair
sure
lifts, yeah.
specifically. I have seen some of those work in spaces to get you to the, next level. You do have to have some decent trunk control, or some sort of safety support to keep you in the seat. And again, those take up space for those that can walk the stairs. And they are costly, but they're out there. Certainly something to look into if that suits your need.
Thank you. We did just have a question pop up in the chat that I want to address because I think it's very important. What does ATP stand for?
I'll take that one. So an ATP, it means Assistive Technology Professional, and we're licensed by the federal government to be able to provide equipment through Medicare. And there's a series of education, and there's also a test, and we have continuing education units that we have to take every year to maintain our license. 30 hours of education every year to maintain our license. Most ATPs are actually accredited by the state Medicaid systems also, and to be able to provide equipment. So if you're not working with an ATP, you really should be, because we have a code of ethics and we have rules that we have to follow, and we are vetted all the time.
I didn't think about us needing to define that.
Yeah.
An occupational therapist. I always have to answer to that one a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah.
Any suggestions on equipment for fitness and adaptive sports, like where to find it and funding?
I think, a lot of these things, when we were kind of chatting about just the aspect of so much equipment, there are neat things out there. There are adaptive devices. I see a lot of things, honestly, on social media where folks like with injury, spinal cord injury, or some sort of neuromuscular disease have come up with some phenomenal things that make their everyday life better, make fitness and things like that better or easier to access for those in chairs or with disabilities. But the funding aspect of that is really hard. Like these kind of go back in my mind to the ADL equipment. So it's kind of the smaller, light DME in a way that is generally not funded. But I would lead you more to look at maybe disease specific organizations that have access to some of these. I would even look, when you're looking at different devices, for trial equipment so you can see if it works for you before you purchase it. I think that's a possibility as well, but that's a difficult one. Yeah, for sure.
Something else too on that is that if you're talking about doing sports, let's just say wheelchair basketball, just go and get involved, go down to watch some games and talk to some of the people that are actually participating, or maybe the coach, or maybe whoever the sponsors are. Talk to them and see, how they got their chair funded, because it is a community and there are a lot of ways to actually get things funded out there if you just reach out and talk to people. So
doesn't hurt to ask.
Nope.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Tom. Thanks. Are there any strollers that have more motors? Is there an affordable way to modify a stroller to be motorized?
Yeah, this question came up for registration. So I do not know of any way to modify a stroller. If you think about what the principles of a stroller are, they're lightweight and they're foldable. So in order to put a motor on something, you have to have a little bit of body to it. Strollers are made to be lightweight to go in the back of a car. So I have not seen anything like that, but that doesn't mean it's not coming around the corner or there's some other.
People haven't tried it. Right?
Yeah, I haven't seen a stroller like that. So
yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Someone said, I need an all-terrain standing type of rig, scooter or something in that line. What resources exist to help me get one?
What is it? Ultralight what?
No, what resources
all-terrain.
All-terrain.
Yep, for an all-terrain standing type of.
Well, yeah, that's really a unicorn. They have all-terrain vehicles.
And all-terrain power wheelchairs.
Yeah, all-terrain power wheelchairs. There's some that have tank treads on them.
Those are more,
Um,
would that be considered like an off market?
it's off market,
type?
definitely.
Yeah.
It's it's
That's,
out of pocket expense.
yeah.
But you know, if someone has disposable income, Permobil actually makes something called an M5 that is a power chair that can tilt and recline, and it is definitely off road. So if you just go to permobil.com and look them up, you can probably see something like that. But from a, and that is it can also be a standing frame also, but it's very expensive. So
All right, thank you. How do I know when I should be conserving my energy by using equipment versus exercising what muscle tissue I have left?
That's a good balance. I mean, I think that is the point, that this is kind of that give and take, where things are most important for you to spend your energy on, you should be focusing on that. And where it's not as important, rely on the equipment. And so when we think of wanting to participate in activities, getting to and from a place is not the activity. Use your equipment to get to and from that place, so you could stand and participate in it, or use your muscle function in a way that allows you to participate. So energy conservation is a big bucket that we talk about a lot, and the importance of it does get undervalued in our day-to-day life. Things take energy and effort to do. Everything does. And so you have to really look at where you spend that energy.
Thank you. Maybe a couple more, and then we can get into the navigating services portion. I do want to mention we did have some questions about modifying vehicles and adaptive driving. We are having an entire presentation tomorrow in this virtual learning series on adaptive driving, so we do encourage you to come back tomorrow. We will be answering those questions then. If you're not able to make it tomorrow to see those questions answered live, we will send out both recordings of today and tomorrow's sessions in an email. Tom.
Yeah,
Tom showing us his dog for everyone who can't see. So let's do one or two more. Let's see here. Info for those transitioning to wheelchairs, especially regarding home and vehicle modifications, Medicare and or insurance. So someone who, yeah, is just starting to get into a wheelchair. What is your, I guess, your top advice or something to look, to plan for? It's kind of a broad question. But...
Yeah, that is really broad. Where do I go with that one? I think that from a standpoint of like our clinic discussions that we have from a therapy standpoint, we're looking at one, adapting use of something like that earlier than most people think. So it's not, again, and I mentioned in our presentation, it's not about waiting till I absolutely need something or that dire need. I think you don't want to underestimate the value of being able to learn a device when you still can get up and out of it, or when you have alternate ways of getting around. It's really important to practice with things when you have the opportunity. So the transition can be hard to accept. And I don't know if that's really where they're going with that question, but also that those things take practice and time. And I'm not selling any therapy here, but it is ideal for you to get instruction and training and practice from an OT or a PT on how to use those pieces of equipment well, so that you're not hurting yourself as you transition in that, or you're not, doing things the harder way. I think I find myself, as well as everybody else, tends to do things the harder way, and then you show them an easy way and they're like, oh, makes total sense.
Yeah, I think if you think about neuromuscular diseases, no doctor can give you a linear timeline on what's going to happen when. So I think that if you're there's a thing called functional ambulation and non-ambulation. So you actually qualify for equipment when you have non-functional ambulation. That means maybe you can take a few steps, but not enough to perform your mobility-related activities of daily living. Now, that's a long phrase, but a therapist or an ATP would understand that. And many times in my practice, I've actually just gotten rigged up a piece of equipment for somebody to actually try, just to see, just so they can make a decision that this is something I want to go forward with. So.
Definitely, thank you. We'll do one more. So we talked a little bit about ramps and needing those for a wheelchair in the house. Who can someone call for front door threshold help?
I think I saw that in some of the questions. Basically, it sounded like the wheelchair couldn't go over the wide threshold or something.
So, so the question, I think we're going to answer. I'll answer it two ways, and you jump in, Katie. So you can go on Amazon. So the ADA says with every inch of rise, you should have a foot of ramp. So if you have a 3-inch rise, you should have 3 feet of ramp, and that creates about a 7-degree pitch, right? And that's typically so someone in a manual wheelchair can roll up that effectively. That's a long term. If you're in a power chair, you do not need that. If you have a 3-inch rise, you could probably put a 2-inch folding ramp there. The question was, who does someone call? And I don't really know. You can call your local ATP, call your local equipment company, call your local therapist. They make rubber risers for thresholds, 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, 5 inch. And so you can get one of those to actually put in front of the door. So, but if you have a power chair, call the company that you got your power chair from. If you don't, then just call your local equipment company or therapist, and they can help you with that.
One other thing I think Tom and I both talked through in multiple situations is even some of these doormats, like those.
The thicker ones.
Yeah, the thicker doormats could bridge some gap, especially with power chairs, to give you, and gap by that I mean height. We've put together, therapists and I who have worked in people's homes have put together ways to create kind of a cover for the threshold as well as a lift. It, takes some creativity, but definitely using the therapy resources or equipment resources is helpful.
Thank you so much. And I do want to mention to everyone participating today that thanks to a lot of help from Tom and Katie, MDA was able to develop an equipment guide to go along with this webinar. So that will be emailed to you with the recordings as well. So that is another resource that we've developed to help you with this topic.